So why even play a solo run? What is the answer we're looking for the moment we change the starter and begin a new game? And finally, what is the best rule set? Hi everyone, in this video I'll be talking about my hardcore solo run rule set. I have two main reasons to make this video. One is that I think the way we decide to play a game tells a lot about the reasons we love playing it. And when it comes to Pokémon, it's just amazing how many arbitrary rules were made up just to have an excuse to come back and play these games again. I believe this by itself would be enough to talk about this topic, but I also have a more, let's say, practical reason. Every time I read the script for one of my solo runs, I want to tell so many things about this, but I refrain from doing so because then I would end up with 1 hour and a half videos that would feel more like an essay than a fun Pokémon run. Okay, so what is the question behind a solo run? Well, the most obvious one would be, can I beat the game with X Pokémon? And it's a fine question to ask, but I feel like most of the times the answer is a straight yes, even without allowing items in battle. Because, exceptions aside, I think that if I'm willing to train a Pokémon up to level 100, then I'm probably not gonna have any trouble beating the Pokémon League by raw stat checking. Throw a double team in the mix and it's GG. Eventually, you win. Don't get me wrong, if this is what makes you like and come back to these games, then more power to you. There are games that I myself replay from time to time because I like the grinding or I like playing the odds. But for me, when it comes to Pokémon Solo Runs, I need to impose a limitation other than the common no items in battle policy. Which brings us to my single most important rule: no overleveling. I want to be clear. The rules that follow this one, while in my opinion do make the game more fun and interesting, have the main purpose to balance the insane difficulty that comes with a level cap, while trying to be coherent with the logic and the idea that inspires me to play. So the question now becomes, can I beat the game with X Pokémon using level caps? A good question, but I'm still not satisfied. And not only due to the unreasonable difficulty. Let's make an example. Say I decide to play a Whismur run in Pokémon Emerald. I know many things about this particular game, but still what I'm gonna do is open Bulbapedia to check every information about Whismur, from the base stats to the movesets. And in this case, I see a normal type with equal attack and special attack, access to Howl, and impressive special coverage. Now, let's pick 3 of the major opponents we'll have to face during the run: Watson, Juan, and Drake. Okay, if I try to think what a Whismur can possibly do versus Drake, it's hard to give a definitive answer, but one thing is clear. Against a Dragon-type trainer, nothing better than a strong Ice move. So probably I need a Whismur with a good special attack, maybe even a modest nature. Now consider Juan and his water team. Using Ice Beam suddenly isn't so tempting, and the best special move I have here is Shockwave. But since Juan starts with a Love Disc, maybe I can attempt to set up Howl and sweep with Return? Seems good. I guess I'll need some special defense to live through the setup along with a decent attack. An Adamant Whismur would be perfect. And for Watson, how about a mixed attacker? Flamethrower the Magneton and use Stomp on everything else. Almost sounds like a plan. Obviously, if I have to play through the entirety of the game with a single Pokémon, not every idea will get the chance to be tested out. And, supposing I can make it to the end, I would finish the run feeling I didn't exploit the full potential of the Pokémon I chose, and that I missed the opportunity to try that very specific gimmicky strategy that would have been so satisfying to pull off. So here's my solution to make a solo run with the level caps both possible and more satisfying. Instead of using a single Pokémon, I allow to train multiple Pokémon of the chosen species. Training more than one Pokémon gives me the possibility to build a strategy from zero for every battle. Furthermore, without being limited to a single Pokémon, there's one game mechanic I can now freely use: the Daycare. The Daycare is the biggest enabler when it comes to a solo run with level caps. First of all, and I find this aspect very exciting, it gives access to the breeding moves, which is something you never get the chance to see even in a casual playthrough. I could probably cite a better example, but take a look at the Shuppet egg moves. Maybe not impressive, but believe it or not, Imprison carried a couple of fights during my Shuppet solo run, and to this day, those are one of the most satisfying victories I got in solo runs. While I'm on the topic, here's my rule to keep the egg moves somewhat balanced. A move only becomes available when I have access to the daycare, to the father species, and when the move itself is learned by the father within the current level cap. So in the case of Imprison, Shuppet had the move available only after Flannery because Rolls learns it at level 31. But the main reason the daycare is so good is that breeding is an insanely strong tool, and in case you are not familiar with it, let me briefly explain why. When two Pokémon lay an egg, the newborn has a chance to inherit up to 3 of the parents' IVs. If I select the Pokémon with the higher stats and keep breeding them, then I'll increase the odds of having good IVs or even obtain a specifically low value if needed. The nature can also be inherited by the mother as long as she's holding an Everstone, so yeah, the daycare basically allows to have something close to the best Pokémon for each and every battle. I guess what I really want to find out when I play a solo run is whether or not a given Pokémon is able to win every single fight given the best possible setup. But a setup is not only made of good IVs and nature. There's also the EV training, the moveset, and the held item. As for the EV training, there's not much to say. The stat boost that comes with the effort values is an unavoidable game mechanic, so in my opinion it's only fair to exploit it unless I want to impose an extra challenge. The moveset and the held items are a bit more tricky. Since my solo run series is focused on Pokémon Emerald, I'll use it again as an example. What if two different Pokémon need the move Facade? Facade is TM42 and in earlier generations TMs are one-time use. And what about tutor moves? Do I really have to give up a cool mimic strategy because I already used the move tutor earlier? And what if I need a White Herb as the held item in multiple battles? Normally the game gives you access to just one of all these things. If my goal is to win every battle with the best possible setup, having to choose puts me in an awkward position. So why choose in the first place? Why not just consider items and tutor moves infinite once I have access to them? There are many ways to justify this. For example, the TM moves can actually be inherited by breeding, a tedious process that gives effectively the same result. And if I really want, I can trade back and forth a Pokémon with another game to make sure it can have that specific tutor move. And while I'm trading, why not give my Pokémon a held item on the way back? Say a White Herb, or TM42. The possibilities are infinite, and any limit we're forcing to ourselves to make the game interesting is, at the end of the day, arbitrary. So, to wrap up this part, here's my final rule set. No items in battle, no overleveling, multiple Pokémon of the chosen species can be trained, always keeping the limit of 1 in battle. As a consequence, nothing prevents exploiting the daycare, so breeding for better stats is okay to do, and the egg moves are on the table, as long as the player has access to the father species and the move is learned within the current level cap. And finally, infinite items and tutor moves. Now, is this the best rule set? I don't think so. These are my rules, the ones that make me stick to the game, and the ones that make me feel like sharing on YouTube the run I just finished, even if that requires me dozens of hours every time. But I can see another person who loves playing Pokémon as much as me, finding them pointless or not enjoyable. If one is not willing to use external tools like PK hacks, for example, this turns into a monstrously massive grind, about which I am not going into detail since I already made a dedicated video. Anyway, this is about all I wanted to say about my approach to solo runs. If you want to share your thoughts on the topic, I'll be happy to read them in the comment section. For those interested, I'll now spend a couple of minutes to talk about some details specific to my Emerald solo runs, and for one particular aspect, I'm gonna ask for your input as well, because I'm very unsure about it. Number 1. Roar. In Pokémon Emerald, there are a couple of battles where the opponent have a Pokémon with the move Roar, the main ones being Maxi 2 and Archie. To reach these two battles, it's mandatory to have an HM user in the team, so it can happen to be forced to switch it in, which goes against the whole purpose of a solo run. What I could do to prevent this is to make my HM users feint wild Pokémon, but it's a long and tedious process, so what I prefer to do whenever the opponent uses Roar is to simply invalidate the attempt and reset the game. Mind that an opponent using Roar is rather uncommon, so I'm fine with this solution. Number 2. Forced double battles. A double battle in a run where you aim to win all fights with one Pokémon raises an obvious issue. There are 3 unavoidable double battles in Pokémon Emerald. One in the Winona Gym, one in Mount Pyre, and of course the one against Tate and Liza. I'm not counting the one you play with Steven because that doesn't require you to have more than one Pokémon. The fight in the Winona Gym can be reached while having a single Pokémon in the team, so the double battle can be easily turned into a mini gauntlet of 2 trainers. It's a bit hard to do if you're not prepared, but it rarely causes me trouble. Mount Pyre, on the other hand, cannot be reached without Surf, so most likely you'll end up with an HM user in the team. It's possible to make the HM user faint in the grass, but again, it's a rather tedious solution for a fight that really doesn't matter. These 2 grunts have around level 30 Pokémon, and at this point the level cap is 42, so having 1 or 2 Pokémon doesn't really impact the outcome. All things considered, I think it's worth to bend the rules a bit and just win the fight with whatever I have in my team. Lastly, the double battle against Tate and Liza. I talk about this in pretty much every run I play. The twins don't accept the challenge if the player only has one Pokémon, so bringing into the battle a second one is mandatory. Ideally, I would try to win using a low-level Magikarp as a placeholder, but with the level cap rule, it is not always possible to pull off the 2v1. And more than half of the runs would either die or be forced to rely on some scam double team strategy. Like, imagine going into this battle with a Gulpin and a Magikarp. That's not happening. So if needed, I allow myself to bring an actual, well-trained second Pokémon. And let me tell you that this leads to some very cool strategies while not making the fight free by any means. Number 3. Leftovers. It's technically possible to train a Zigzagoon up to level 100 using an EXP share and without ever sending it in battle. If we don't consider the post-game, in Pokémon Emerald, leftovers can only be acquired via pickup from a Pokémon above level 81. So, is leftovers a legit item? I'm not sure. In my first couple of runs, I remember using it in some borderline impossible fights, like the champion fight with Numel, but since I consider leftovers a very overpowered item and it has a strong tendency to turn every battle in the same long stall, I nowadays refuse to use it unless there's truly no other way. It's just like Double Team. It's not formally banned, but it's not gonna appear in my runs if not as a very, very last resort. Lastly, number 4. Trading for egg moves. I said earlier that when it comes to an egg move, the requirements are 1. To have access to the father species, and 2. That the move has to be learned within the current level cap. But what if the necessary species is a starter? Or a version exclusive? Can I trade a Mudkip to give Surskit the move Mudshot? Can Snorunt have spikes in an Emerald Solo Run, considering that Roselia is only obtainable in Pokémon Ruby and Sapphire? The answer I gave back then is a yes for both cases. But at the time, I didn't have a strong defined rule and I was still calibrating the rule set as a whole. I do like having as many options available as possible, so I'm inclined to allow egg moves obtainable within the main Gen 3 games. So no Fire Red Leaf Green or Colosseum XD. But tell me what you think. Maybe that will help me to finally settle on a definitive rule. Anyway, this was all I wanted to talk about. If you ever end up trying a hardcore solo run, let me know how it goes. And of course, I'm open to read some feedback about the rule set. After all, there's always space for improvement. I hope I managed to make the video somewhat enjoyable despite the more technical topic, and if you made it this far, chances are you might enjoy one of my solo runs, so check my Emerald Hardcore Solo Run playlist. For now, nothing else to say, so you have a nice day, and as for me, back to theory crafting.